This is Marianne Bellasorti. I am the Vice President of Advocacy at Pathways PA. Um, I'm really glad that you all could be here with me today to discuss reaching pay equity. Um, I've muted everyone. Apparently, I somehow muted myself earlier on, so apologies for that. You seem to have all found the chat box, though, so I hope that you will go ahead and chat if you have any questions, and I will unmute you all at the end of this so you can ask questions directly. I want to first start off by thanking our sponsors for this. First, Pathways PA, which is one of my organizations. Pathways PA works to end the cycle of poverty, homelessness, and abuse. We have programs that are residential programs, adult education, and other types of direct services, as well as a department that just works on public policy issues such as pay equity, paid family leave, and paid sick days. I also want to thank the Friends of the Delaware County Women's Commission, which is a volunteer nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting full equality for women and girls in Delaware County. We just had an amazing event this weekend called Womenomics, where we brought together women from across the county to discuss their economic and personal needs. And next week, we are co-hosting or acting as the charitable partner for a similar event for girls called Girls Spark. So anyone in the area, I recommend that you go to the Friends website and check that out and look at all of our other events. And then finally, Delaware County Business and Professional Women and Business Professional Women of District 10 are both co-sponsors of this event. They're part of BPWPA, which is a statewide organization of 1,600 plus members in 75 local organizations and 12 districts throughout the state. They're a leading advocate for working women in our state. I work very closely with BPW in a lot of different ways and thrilled to have their support for this webinar as well. So I want to start out just setting the stage for what we're talking about today, which is pay equity. You might hear me call it equal pay, pay parity. There are a few other terms for it, and they do each mean different things, but I tend to use them interchangeably. What's important to remember at the end of the day is that what we're talking about is ending race or gender or disability discrimination in wages and in job types. So you may think that this was solved years ago. The Equal Pay Act of 1963, for instance, made it illegal to pay men and women different salaries if they were doing similar work. The Civil Rights Act made it illegal to discriminate in the workplace based on race, national origin, religion, or sex. But we're here in 2019 and the wage gap still exists. So when I'm talking about equal pay today, I'm usually going to be talking about how much a given group earns when they're working full-time and year-round compared to men. Sometimes we look at it really broadly, women versus men. Other times we break it down more. We might look at numbers for people of color, for people who identify as LGBTQ, for people with disabilities. And I'll try to put into each category what we're looking at specifically as we go through. It's important to know that the lack of equal pay affects everyone. Even if you are, the white man that we are comparing everything to, people in your family and your own household income may be affected by the lack of equal pay. Women right now are half of the workforce. They are the equal or the main breadwinner in 4 out of 10 families. So when women are paid unequally, it shrinks the pie for everyone. Many families are relying on a woman's income for part of or all of their daily expenses. And when women are earning unequal pay, our economy suffers too. Every employee is someone's customer. So any person who is earning unequally has less money to spend in their local stores, in their shops, in their pharmacies, or even in big box stores. You may also hear that there are reasons for unequal pay, that it has to do with women taking time off from the workforce, that there are a number of issues with looking at the topic of equal pay. But here's the thing, even after you count for all sorts of factors, when men and women graduate from college and enter the workforce, there's a 7% difference in their earnings just 1 year after graduation. There's no time for anyone to have any um, intervening issues that would make that possible. Pay inequity is a real thing and something that we need to address. If the current trends continue, women in Pennsylvania are not going to see equal pay until the year 2068. So, what does unequal pay look like? My friends at AAUW provided this great chart that shows the 10 occupations with the largest pay gaps for women. It's starting with securities, commodities, and fiscal services sale agents, where there is a $40,000 difference in men's earnings and women's earnings. As you go down the line, you'll see financial managers, retail salespeople, insurance sale agents. All of them show a pay gap between women and men. And sadly, it's not just those occupations. Women, on average, earn less than men in nearly every single occupation that we have sufficient data for. So, yeah, not just those 10, not just certain things, every single one of them. In jobs that are middle skills, which are jobs that um, require more than a high school education, but maybe not a college degree, you see a difference in the pay for jobs that are done mainly by women versus the jobs done mainly by men. If it's a job that you typically see a woman in, they only earn 66% of what is earned in jobs done typically by men, even though these are jobs that aren't requiring a college degree, um, and they all require some type of specialized education, but not college. Another thing to note is that women are not choosing to go into these lower paid jobs. You will sometimes hear that women want flexibility in their jobs, so that's why they go into retail, into a sales job, into something that's more hourly based. First of all, that's probably not true. Many times women are just in jobs because these are the jobs that they're expected to do. They may not have heard that they were able to qualify for other types of jobs. They may not feel comfortable in those jobs. They just didn't have the information. Or if they go into some higher paying jobs, there's often a risk of harassment and discrimination. It's important to note too that in those supposedly flexible jobs, there's usually very little flexibility in choosing your hours, choosing your schedule, being able to take time off to take care of your children. So there's just a lot of myths in that statement that people should be aware of. So where do we see inequity? We see it in pay, obviously, and I've talked about that a little bit. We also see it in salary history. If someone has a lower pay because of pay inequity in their first job or in any job in their lifetime, it can follow you throughout the rest of your career. It's one of the first things that you're asked in a serious job interview is how much are you earning at your current job? And if you're earning less because of pay inequity, you're probably going to get a lower offer down the line. Women and people of color see this happen over and over again, and it is something that depresses their wages over time. Throughout their lives, they could earn hundreds of thousands of dollars less because of salary history questions and pay inequity. There's job segregation, which I talked about very briefly. But it's true that women do tend to work in certain types of jobs. They're sometimes called pink collar jobs. They're often sales jobs, clerical, service jobs. More than half of all women workers are in these positions. Studies show that the more women or people of color are in an occupation, the less that it pays. And then, that brings us into low wage jobs where people begin to earn less money, have less flexible hours, um, and because of that are bouncing around from job to job instead of being able to save money or work towards higher wages. And then finally, there's access to paid leave. Many of these pink collar jobs or lower wage jobs don't offer things like paid sick days or paid leave. So even though women are often expected to remain caregivers for their families, they get penalized when they take the time off to do that. This is an issue that can go both ways, though. It's important to know that pay equity is not just about your actual wages, but about your benefits, but about all sorts of other things. There are lots of jobs out there where men are not able to get, say, paternity leave, even though women in that job are able to earn maternity leave. And so it's important to know that this inequity does cross both ways, and it does still affect families, whether it's a man or a woman who's feeling it. All of these issues are adding up to increased poverty and decreased retirement income for families and for workers. Today's wage gap in Pennsylvania is leaving women with over $400,000 less in earnings over their lifetime. It takes women, on average, 10 years more to earn what men have earned in their work life. So, in other words, to have what a man earned when he turned 60, a woman needs to work until she's 70. Having access to equal pay would, of course, drastically change that number. It would also change the number of people living in poverty. Um, IWPR has done some research on this, and it shows that equal pay would cut poverty among working women and their families by more than half and would add $513 billion to the national economy. Here in Pennsylvania, again, the poverty rate could be reduced by half, and that includes poverty among employed single mothers. So here's a more concrete way of looking at what eliminating the wage gap could do. If we were able to get rid of it here in Pennsylvania, working women would have enough money to pay for 14 additional months of childcare. Think for a minute about just how expensive childcare is and what that would mean. 86 more weeks of groceries, 8 more months uh, of coverage for their mortgage and utilities, or 12 more months of rent. Overall, it adds up to about $6,468 more in earnings each year. I'm guessing that you all could do quite a bit with that amount of money. I know I could do a lot with that amount of money. Um, it would be about $20 billion into the Pennsylvania economy, or 2.8% of our gross domestic product. So, what do wages look like in Pennsylvania? How are we at this point where there's such a huge gap? This looks at the median annual earnings for women and men in Pennsylvania, and it breaks it down not just by women and men, but it also looks at race. So you see that white men earn almost more than any other category that we're looking at except for Asian men. White women, meanwhile, are earning far less. So white men are earning on average about $53,000. White women are earning 41,000. But across the line, as you look, you can see that Hispanic men and women are earning less. Black men and women are earning less. Asian women are pretty close to what white women are earning. There's about $1,000 difference there. And as I mentioned, Asian men are earning more than white men. Native Americans are earning less. People in other races or who identify as multiracial are earning less. So this is not just an issue for white women. um, we really need to look at it as something that is affecting people of color across the board. And while I don't have the numbers here, it also affects people who identify as LGBTQ, who are disabled, who have a number of other factors that are looked at when they are out looking for jobs. One of the questions that I've gotten from many of you as we set up this webinar is what to do if you're personally facing pay inequity. And so I wanted to go through this little chart of what you can do. This all came from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which handles pay inequity. The first thing that you can try to do is resolve it informally. If you feel like you can meet with your supervisor to talk about the issue or to someone in your HR department, that's one of the first steps that's recommended. If you're in a place that has an employee handbook, there may be some policies within it that can show you what to do. If you're a member of a union, talk to your union representative. It's nice when you can do this in an informal way, but we know that isn't always possible. It's just good to think about it before you move ahead. The next thing you can do is educate yourself about your rights. And this is where the EEOC comes into play. They enforce the Equal Pay Act as well as Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So you can find out much more about them on their website. If you work in the federal sector, you can also get information from them about how to make a complaint at that level. You want to make sure that you're taking a look at your timeline too. Um, if you're filing a complaint, you have a certain amount of time between when the pay inequity issue happened bef- and when you can file it. And if you don't file in the right amount of time, you're not necessarily able to do something. So it's important to start looking at your rights as soon as you know that there's a problem. You also want to make sure that you keep accurate records. So about a million years ago, when I worked at another organization before graduate school, one of my jobs was to talk to people who were facing pay inequity. And we used to tell them to make notes on their conversations, stick it in an envelope, and send it to themselves in the mail so it would have a postmark on the sealed envelope. And that would show in a court when certain things happened and give you kind of a calendar of what was going on. With email these days, it's a little bit easier to get things time-stamped than it was back then, but it's still important to keep track of everything. If you have documents showing the pay inequity that you're facing, track them, date them, make sure you keep them in a safe place. If you have a conversation with your boss, with your coworker, with someone else, write it down, date it, keep it in a safe place. These records can help prove an ongoing issue and can give you some credence if you do decide to file a complaint. You can also check in with your state and local agencies to see if they have any laws that would help you. And then finally, take some time to consider legal assistance if that's what you have to do. It may be a union representative. You may be able to find an attorney that practices employment or discrimination law. You can also contact your state bar association to see if there's anyone who can help you. Sometimes they're able to refer you to a pro bono legal service, or may have a program with a law school where they can provide you some free or reduced cost legal help. Taking action at a really formal level is not for everyone, but it's important that everyone have information about the tools if that's the way they want to go. At the end of this, I'm going to share a resource as well for a pay negotiation workshop through AAUW that may be helpful to you as well in taking some informal action about salary negotiation and raising your wages and benefits. So, what can we do about pay equity? Let's start with some big picture goals. One of the first things that we can do is change the laws. The Paycheck Fairness Act has been introduced and reintroduced for 22 years now. It just came out of the House with a positive vote last week and is now on its way to the Senate. This bill would improve equal pay protections by banning questions about salary history, which we've talked about, eliminate an employer's ability to keep salaries confidential. So there are some employers that will not let you discuss your salary among coworkers, and it would end that practice. And it would require employers to disclose some salary data so that people can really look at pay trends at a high level and start to see some of the issues that are there. Paycheck Fairness Act is really important in moving forward and ending pay inequity. There's also some other laws that may be able to help. State and local government work all the time to pass laws that would end inequity. Philadelphia, for instance, passed a salary history law a few years back that was subsequently held up through a lawsuit and is still not happening at the moment. But other cities and states have passed those laws. I certainly encourage you to take a look at what's happening at the state level and what's happening locally in your own city and see if there's anything moving that you are able to make calls or support. There are also issues such as paid sick and safe days or access to paid family leave that would help change some of the benefits problems that we see, where women and people of color often don't have access to this time that's considered a regular benefit for others. And then again, salary history, I know I keep talking about it, but it is so important and such an easy fix. You can also work to change things in your own workplace. Educate others about what their rights are and about what should be happening under the law. And if you are an employer, promote diversity. Make sure that you're really looking at the best candidates for the job and not the candidates that look just like you. Support women and girls. This is huge. Help women and girls look at jobs in the STEAM and the STEM industry. We've heard that girls, even in high school, already think that those jobs are not for them. We need to be talking to girls who are in elementary school and middle school and helping them see the value of good jobs with high pay, especially in the science and math fields. Mentoring girls is incredibly important, making sure that they can see the success that you've had, and success in other places. And then again, creating job training opportunities, and of course, when possible, making sure that they're paid. So more people can come in, especially if you're in a non-traditional workplace for women, making sure people can come in and get experience that leads to jobs down the line. Because my job is all about advocacy, I want to do a little spotlight on advocacy here and talk about what is important to look for in a pay equity bill. This information, again, came from AAUW. I think so. First, it's really important to make sure this bill covers all employees. You want it to cover people in the public workforce, the private workforce, small businesses. There should be no exemptions when it comes to pay equity. You also want to make sure that it offers protections, that people can't be retaliated against for discussing what they earn, or to make sure that if they file a complaint, they're not retaliated against by their employer. Clarifying salary history comes up again here as well. So does clarifying what is a reason to pay differently and what is not. You want to make sure that an employer defense can't be vague. It has to look really at the job. And if there's a reason to pay someone differently, if they are coming in with more education, for instance, that needs to be addressed within what the employer is saying. It needs to be a really narrow definition. Excuse me. You want to establish strong legal procedures and remedies. Um, Look at protections that will incentivize employers to pay an equal wage. Excuse me 1 second, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. So yeah, make sure that there are strong legal procedures out there that will help employers and employees set precedent, show damages, and just make sure there are remedies in place when unequal pay is happening. And finally, you want to make sure that there's compensation based on comparable worth. Employers need to compensate men and women equally. That's just the way it should be and what should be in a pay equity bill. So how do we get to these goals? One of the first things is to join a call like this one and learn more. You can start working with a coalition in order to get some of these goals down on paper and really make them happen in your state. So I suggest, again, looking at AAUW or looking at some of the people who help sponsor this call. So Pathways PA, Business and Professional Women, Friends of the Women's Commission, we are always out there working on issues around equal pay. You can write, whether you want to write an op-ed and get it published in the paper or write a social media post and share it with your friends. Let people know about the topic and about what you've learned. Advocacy can be as detailed as going to a hearing and testifying, or it can be as simple as picking up the phone and calling your legislator. Those phone calls literally take less than a minute. You can write a script beforehand even. All you have to do is say your name, where you live, and why you support or don't support a bill or an issue. And of course, educate. Make sure that everyone knows what you're learning and is able to move forward on these issues. So those are the big picture goals. But if you're me, you want to know what you can do right this second to make change. Those big picture goals can take a really long time. And so one of the first things that you can do if you are a worker is take a pay negotiation class. AUW offers some classes, which I will share a website for at the end of this. There are other things that you can do in order to negotiate better pay. You can also think about reporting problems in your workplace. Again, this isn't for everyone, but if you are seeing problems, it's time to at least start documenting them. So if you decide to move forward, you can. If you're an employer, you can conduct a self-audit. Again, I'll share a resource for that as well. This is a 10-step process that will help you look at what you are paying people, what benefits you're providing, and really make sure that you are providing equal pay right now. If you do a self-audit, publish the results. Do it every year. Let people know that you are working actively towards equal pay. It's actually a great look for your business, and will be really good for you and your employees as well. Stop asking for salary history is a big one. And then finally, learn how to hire without implicit bias. There are a lot of tools out there that can help you take a look at your job descriptions, at your benefits, and just make sure that you are not hiring, again, based on what you look like or who you're comfortable with, but really taking a look at making positions open to everyone and recruiting a really diverse community to be your employees. That will benefit your business in the long run and benefits everyone. All right, so here are some resources that I hope can be helpful to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you all and let you ask some questions. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to share, anything else that they would like to know?
I think you covered a lot of ground, Marianne. I feel well informed. So I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Brenda.
Marianne, it's Terry Miller. Can you talk to us a little bit about paid family leave and where that stands statewide?
Sure, Terry. So paid family leave is an issue that Pathways PA has been working on for years now, I would say, in conjunction with some other people across the state, including some of you on this call today. We have a coalition currently called Paid Leave for PA, possibly to be called something else soon. Stay tuned. And we have been actively working on legislation around paid family leave that would follow legislation that's been passed in 7 other states across the country. So this legislation would not put the burden of paid family leave on the employer alone, but would provide workers an opportunity to pay into a program that then when they need time to care for themselves or care for a loved one, they can apply to in order to receive some of their paycheck back while they are out dealing with the serious medical issue. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at paidleaveforpa.org to get some other information about it. We know, of course, that access to paid leave would be huge, both in making sure that women especially can return to work after childbirth or caring for an elderly parent while keeping their seniority and their pay. It is an issue that could definitely affect equal pay in Pennsylvania and across the country. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about it more offline later.
Thank you.
Anyone else who has any questions or feedback or something else that they would like to learn?
Marianne, this is Kathy Beveridge.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. I was listening to, I think it was Marty Moss-Coane's show today on the radio talking about this issue. And one of the things that surprised me is that even the speakers on the show really kept wanting to talk about differences that justify the pay differences, physical job differences and others. And I feel like we've gone beyond that in terms of what the data that I'm seeing, even some data that Price shared with me about people who have a change operation and suddenly their pay changes doing the same job. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering why that is and what we can do to address that. And obviously you've got some good data that we need to keep bringing out, but people seem to want to keep bringing lots of justifications.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point. I think that so many times there are questions about what does justify unequal pay that maybe speakers want to get ahead of that first, before someone else can ask it, so they can get into the reasons for why we still see it, even if you take out all those other issues. But I think you're right that we do need to be focusing on the real unequal pay that we're seeing every day. So I don't have a reason necessarily for why other people are doing it. I do think it's important to point out, though, all of the ways that women and people of color are facing pay inequity, um, and how we can deal with that. And I guess maybe if you're an employer, it's important to know that there are certain things that you can still do without being discriminatory. Um, but as you said, we are moving beyond some of them. There's a big problem that needs to be addressed as well. And if not, I want to thank all of you so much for attending this, and also thank again our sponsors. I have their websites up here. I hope that you will go check them all out. I will send around this PowerPoint presentation for those of you who are on the phone. If I don't have your email address for some reason, if you can type it in the chat box so I can make sure I can get it to you. And then also we'll be putting this presentation up on YouTube, and so I will notify you about that as well.
Thank you, Marianne. It was very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.